Uh, Friends, I first of all feel privileged to be called upon to speak at this one of the younger central universities, Central University of Punjab. It's a great privilege and honor that I feel. And today, as I recognize many of my former colleagues as well as students, I thought of sharing my thoughts on the complicated subject of what to teach in a biology department. Now, this is a problem has come because of my own personal journey. My degrees are in chemistry. I was appointed as a lecturer in biochemistry and then reader in endocrinology and professor in zoology. I spent a lot of time in zoology departments, and therefore it was always an existential problem as to what exactly we teach. So I had developed my own ideas on that, and today I wish to share some of these ideas. First of all, let us ask a simple question: what is biology? Biology is one of the three pillars of natural science. Natural science, as you know, originated in Europe during the 15th century, during what we call as an intellectual cultural revolution named as Renaissance in the history textbooks. And then through colonial rule, this natural science spread to all the colonies, including India. Now, what is this natural science? It's a new philosophy which wants to understand the structure and functioning of nature. Nature means you can call it universe, the material world, whatever is environment, whatever you call it. And it does not answer supernatural questions. So there is no discussion about what is the height of God or some such thing. That doesn't come under science. Now, this natural science, when it undertook the journey, pretty soon thought of asking three types of questions. And the first group of people who asked questions about the physical nature of this world: is this real? Can I understand the functioning of this nature? And these are called physics or physicists, and the subject matter is called physics, which is the first pillar, probably the strongest pillar in the natural sciences. This physics studies the physical structure, measurable physical properties, which they call as operational concepts, and then discover the relation between these measured values or concepts in the form of very crisp and precise algebraic equations, and which are known to all of us as laws of nature. Not only that, because of the intellectual confidence that they have, physicists love to call this universal laws of nature. And that's how, when you open any textbook of physics, undergraduate level, what you see is chapters written as laws of mechanics, laws of thermodynamics, laws of electricity, like that, all these universal laws, which essentially tells you how nature behaves. So physics, among all the natural sciences, is the most successful in understanding the structure and functioning of nature. Of course, in 1903, they were so sure of their knowledge and understanding that a very famous physicist, Lord Rutherford, he made a very great statement at that point, and he said, what is there in science? There is only physics, the rest is stamp collection, he said. Within 10 years, he had to eat his words, because at that point in history, quantum mechanics was not known. Subsequently, during 1910, 12 and later, quantum mechanics has a distinct form of physics dealing with the elementary particles and their behavior, and it threw spanners in the physical understanding of nature. We will not discuss the details, but even then, it is the most theoretical understanding of nature, both structure and function. And then there were other people, scientists, who believed that, remember, I made a statement that natural science is also a philosophy. It wants to know the truth. So the physics people are one type of natural scientists, and they got their truth in the physical manifested properties of nature. There is a second tribe of scientists called chemists, and the subject matter is called chemistry, and they studied the composition of this material world, and ultimately they had a question. This world has got a diversity of objects, each one made up of some substance. They asked a very simple question, very innocent question. Is there one substance which we can call as universal substance, from which all other substances and objects are made of? That is what chemistry wanted to know as the ultimate truth in this nature. Unfortunately, they could not find such a substance. The closest they could come was 72 truths. As Mendeleev wrote, he gave us the periodic table, and he wrote in his book that he has discovered 72 truths. What he meant is elements. This was so, but today, of course, we know we have more than 140 elements. That's not the point. For a chemist, element is the truth, because element have properties which is not possessed by other elements. So this is the ultimate truth in chemistry. Now, natural science is characterized by one property, and that is that you have to do experiments, and all experiments, if you look at, there is only one experiment that everybody does, physics people, chemistry people, biologists, they measure something or other. Therefore, we say measurement is the foundation of all science, natural science. Physics people measure operational concepts, volume, pressure, magnetic voltage, all this kind of thing. Chemistry people also measure transition state temperature, melting point, boiling point. And one other thing they measure is the concentration of solutions. I will not go into detail. The whole point is physics and chemistry always measure something or other, and that they discover their truth in whatever form they have told us. The third pillar of natural science, which is a topic of interest for today, biology, it studies living organisms as opposed to physics and chemistry, which for a long time, long periods, almost like 1800 years, they studied only inanimate objects, that is what we call popularly material objects, material substances. Biology, on the other hand, deals with biosphere, which means living organisms. Till today, what is a living organism is a very difficult question to answer. I will not go into detail. I will only provoke you by saying there is no correct answer to this question, what is a living organism? Now, this biology, unlike physics and chemistry, did a grave mistake. For 1750 years, it did not measure anything. I told you 3-4 minutes back that physics and chemistry, and as demanded by the philosophy of natural science, written by people like Francis Bacon and others, you will have to measure something. But biologists did not measure. What did they do? They only observed and documented their observations. So it is also called as phenomenological biology. I'll get back to this later. Now, thus, natural science progressed physics and chemistry through experimentation by asking questions, designing experiments, observing and getting results. Reproducibility of these results by somebody else is an obligate requirement, and the extreme definition of what constitutes as a true natural science was given by another British philosopher, Karl Popper, who gave us Poppernian logic, and he said that non-falsifiable knowledge is not science, which simply means that science should have a provision whereby it can be falsified. Whatever claims made, whatever theories put up, it should be able to falsify such an experiment. You have to suggest yourself, and that is true science. Now, this is an extreme definition. Many people get confused by this Poppernian logic. I have no time to discuss. but leave it at that. What we have to understand is science is based on logic. Now, I mentioned that it is a philosophy seeking truth, and we are immediately reminded of other philosophies, mythologies, and other things which we call as religion, which also seeks truth, or it at least claims it. But please remember, those religious types of mythology or theology or even philosophy of religion, this is based on faith. And faith does not demand logic. Logic is seen only in science. However, we should not be carried away by this, because logic also has certain limitations. Logic is not helpful when we try to establish its own reliability. Nobody has validated logic. I will have time to answer questions later. One of the greatest systems of logic was developed in India by a sage called Vadiraja, who comes from Madhva school of philosophy, which is one of the systems of philosophy. 28 systems are there which talk about Vedanta or Upanishads. Now, that logic is not reliable if you try to validate it. That rational thinking will give us all the solutions and lead us to understand is itself a faith. This is an important point which all younger people should remember, that as scientists, we believe in logic, and as the sentence I have just now said, it is a belief. Nobody has validated logic, and therefore, in some sense, science is also a faith, but it is different from religious sense, because there you cannot ask questions, they only have excuses. Here you will have to ask questions and you will have to answer them. That is why this faith is much better than that faith. There are no stupid questions, there are only stupid answers. Science deals with what is measurable. Now we directly come to the third pillar, which is biology. And I have made already a provocative statement that this biology for about 1750 years fundamentally did not measure anything. It used a pair of eyes to observe nature, especially the animate matter, living organisms, and then described whatever they saw. So this is called descriptive biology. And in the growth of biological thought, which lasts 2000 years, this is the first phase, which is the longest phase. This is descriptive, it is phenomenological, it is based on observations. Please remember, it never asked a single question. This is also called as classical biology out of deep respect, and it resulted in natural history. It catalogs and emphasizes taxonomy and other areas for a simple reason: there is only information in this part of biology. And whenever information becomes too big, it is a natural instinct of human brain to classify things. And that's how we got classification of organisms. You all are aware of the contributions of many great people, scholars, taxonomists, and others. And therefore, we got all these things. However, there was no question asked, and therefore, we got information, we did not get knowledge. Now, this part of biology got a boost when in 1859, Darwin and to some extent Wallace contributed and developed a theory called the theory of organic evolution by natural selection. I'll speak on it for 2 more minutes later. So that was classical biology. And therefore, all the university departments of biology naturally taught this biology only for a long time. Our oldest universities are hardly 800, 900 years old, and all of them taught this classical biology. However, when you teach information, there is a limit to that. Therefore, they said, I will teach this part and I will call it zoology. You teach that part and you call it botany. Subsequently, in the 17th century, when Anton von Leeuwenhoek and Robert Hooke invented what we call as microscope, then people realized there is another microscopic world not visible to eyes, naked eyes. In between, of course, their magnifying lens and other things were developed. So basically then, again they started description of these so-called microscopic organisms invisible to naked eye, and subsequently this developed as microbiology, another phylogenetic group-based classification, and therefore in the place of one biology, because all living organisms are studied by biology, we had three departments in the university system, colonial system of education, where you see zoology, botany, and microbiology. In the 17th century, there was a French mathematician called René Descartes, who was the foremost mathematician during that era, and he is also the first philosopher of science. And he made many statements, wrote many books, published many papers. But what is important for us are only two things. One, pertaining to biology, he told that any amount of description, you will never understand biology. You have to ask questions and do experiments. Then only you will understand biology. And when they started doing that because of his advice, they realized that they don't have a tool, they don't have a technique, they don't have anything. And therefore, biology borrowed concepts and techniques of physics and chemistry and started asking question, what is this, how is that, and all that. And therefore, a new biology came, which is called as reductionist biology, and it has two parts that we have to understand. One, it is called reductionist biology because biology was reduced to physics and chemistry. You can call it physiology, you can call it biochemistry, you can call it biophysics, you can call it molecular biology. All these are all semantic jugglery. Basically, biology is reduced to the concepts and language of physics and chemistry. And it has a second meaning. And the second meaning is more important because that is where it became a failure. All the biochemistry, molecular biology that we have done and people are doing, thousands of scientists, this will not make us understand for a very simple reason. The most important property of living organisms is that they exhibit what they call emergent properties, which means if you look at living organisms, all of you are aware, their structural organization has variety of hierarchy of levels from molecular to populations and ecosystems. And what you have to observe, and which everybody has observed, that the properties that exhibited by, let us say, a cell is not found in any of the subcellular organelles, which means the whole is more than the sum of the parts. Mathematically put, it means simple, 2 plus 2 is 5, not 4. The emergent properties were difficult to understand and to explain, and biochemistry, or whatever you call it, reductionist biology, completely ignored and did not explain these properties. And therefore, we say that 300 years of reductionist biology did not make us understand. It only repeated what the classical biologists were doing. They were describing in morphological terms. These people describe in molecular terms. Other than that, it is exactly similar to classical biology. So many departments of biology, zoology, botany, microbiology, then what happened, for various other reasons, separated units and called them as Department of Genetics, Department of Physiology. Calcutta University has a Department of Physiology, Department of Biochemistry, and so on and so forth. What it means is, instead of emphasizing the structure of living organisms, they said we should focus on the living processes, the physiological, developmental, and behavioral processes, and you describe them, and that becomes a new department, because the classical departments, for political reasons, were not teaching all these things. And therefore, as far as teaching of biology goes, it came from one department. If you go to Andhra University, there is label is still there. It is called Department of Natural Science. They were teaching physics, chemistry, biology, all in one roof. But if you now see any university, Delhi University as an example, we have 10 departments, each one saying that they are teaching biology. And that is what happened with the reductionist biology. However, I mentioned that it had a limitation, that it could not explain the so-called emergent properties. At that point, we got advice from the great physicists that even if you do experiments and even if you study part by part, you will not be able to explain the emergent properties. There is only one way to do that, which we can call it as in silico biology. Some of you know all these things, computational biology, bioinformatics, and other things. So the first biology is the in vivo biology, live organisms you study. The second one, biochemistry, molecular biology and all, you can call it in vitro biology. And the third one, which some people are practicing, this is called in silico biology. You do computational modeling with all the input and then see that the emergent properties emerges because of the interaction among the components. It requires modeling. There are some limitations for this also, but we will not go into detail. And so biologists now realized that only in silico biology make us understanding biology, whereas other two are only descriptive. One at the morphological level, another at molecular level. And therefore, if you translate this into teaching department, you will have to, if you want to do justice to biology, you will have to teach all the three. Now, there lies the problem. How can I teach zoology plus botany plus microbiology plus biochemistry plus Timbuktu, all other disciplines? You cannot do this because you have only so many years to spend and so much timetable space. Therefore, we have to integrate. We have to conceptualize. One of the problems with biologists is during 1750 years, they did not raise any question. They only made observations. In the reductionist biology era, they asked questions. How does it work? How do you move? How do you reproduce? How do you remember? How do you do digestion? How do you get energy? All these things they talked about, what is called how question. And the answer comes in a prefix called mechanism. So biology became essentially mechanism of hormone action, mechanism of immune response, mechanism of growth, mechanism of reproduction, mechanism of this, mechanism of that. And therefore, these reductionist biologists said, we are giving you the mechanism, therefore we understand. Now we realize they also don't understand. They only give description. Now this classical biology got a big boost, as I mentioned. In the 1859, Darwin wrote and published a book called Origin of Species. The title is wrong. He hardly spoke about speciation, which is a very tough problem in biology. But what he was talking about was organic evolution by natural selection, which is one of the greatest ideas, concepts in biology. And today, if you want to conceptualize biology, it has to be based on only this major concept of the so-called organic evolution. We will not go into detail about all this because there is no time. But Darwin gave a partial answer to all this. How did it all happen? How do you get all this biodiversity? And there, his ideas of evolution, also when translated into action, essentially man realized that it takes millions of years or even billions of years to arrive at the present or current biodiversity. And the only constant thing in biodiversity property is change. All of us are changing. All living organisms are changing. The etymological meaning of this word evolution is change. So change is the most constant property of living organisms. However, others who followed Darwin used another word or phrase called survival of the fittest. I will not go into detail again. This is a very wrong concept because many people have misunderstood this. We will not discuss all that. All this is taught as evolutionary biology and as part of biology, but this is the framework within which you have to discuss biochemistry, physiology, molecular biology. Everything will come only if you discuss it under the framework of evolution. And that is what Dobzhansky also had made a statement on this. Unfortunately, very few people understand these phrases. However, what reductionist biologists did was they hijacked biology and they asked a question. As I said, they asked a lot of questions. What are the proximate causes for physiological, developmental, and behavioral processes? They got answers. All of you know about all these things, signaling mechanisms and all that. And that essentially satisfied them and they felt proud. In fact, if you see the Nobel Prizes, majority of have gone to reductionist biology because they appear to give us a feeling that we understand, we decipher what exactly is biological systems. The ultimate cause of all these physiological, developmental, behavioral processes, nobody can answer, because that will lead us to questions which are uncomfortable. It will lead to question like, is there a God who is the ultimate cause? So no biologist will ask this question. All right, we will leave it at that. When we discuss philosophy of science, we can answer some of these questions later. So reductionist biology became the biology. I am using, without any shame, this phrase, the biology. It is the name of a book written by Ernst Mayr, and he is one of the greatest biologists after Darwin. In fact, he is the Darwin of the 20th century, and he lived up to 103 years. He wrote more than 35 books. One of the books is Growth of Biological Thought, and this is biology. If you have time, please read that. I borrowed that term, but for most of us, reductionist biology became the biology. And I am sure most of you are biochemistry people, physiology people, molecular biology people, genetics people. So for you, reductionist biology becomes the biology. Systems biology, which is representing that so-called in silico biology, it started very, very late in India. In fact, till 5-7 years back, there was no university which was teaching systems biology. But now we have more than a dozen universities. Delhi University started in physics department, systems biology. University of Hyderabad started a course on MSc systems biology. All that will not go into detail, but it became now the lingua franca of discussing biology is systems biology. But now you see, these three parts of biology or phases of biology, practitioners said what they do is the biology, whereas what the other two do is not biology. And that is where we are doing injustice to biology, because please remember, all of us are teachers. All of us have once been student community. Therefore, we are discussing science in an educational context. We are not CCMB scientists, NII scientists, where research is done, science is discussed. There is no context of education. Whereas in the university system, colleges and universities, whatever you do has to have educational meaning. And therefore, when we talk so much of science teaching, especially biology teaching, the question arises, what is the educational value of a biology which is partly discussed, but not whole of biology? And that leads us to the next important question, what exactly is education? I will take only 3-4 minutes because this is a huge topic. Education should empower each human consciousness and elevate it to reach its highest level. This is a philosophical definition. To understand it in a practical terms, let us go through 5,000 years of education that we had. Let us start with ancient India, where we had some student wants to learn and wants to understand life. So he is called a seeker, and for that he wants educated, and he has to seek the teacher, which means the guru is not available in college or university. There is no entrance exam. Therefore, he has to search for that guru, who usually will be in some Himalayas or in forest. And therefore, a student searches for a guru. The word guru means, gu means a dispeller, ru means ignorance. Therefore, a dispeller of ignorance is the teacher, and a student seeks the teacher, works at his feet, and after some years gets educated. Now, this was going on for a long time, but then we know that when we had British rule, the whole system changed to colonial system of universities, colleges, schools, and others. And this was according to Lord Macaulay, who gave a speech in British Parliament in 1834, asking that this system should be introduced in India, which is their prize colony. And so we got Calcutta University, Madras University, Bombay University, and so on other. Today we have about 900 universities and 14,000 colleges. Now what they impart here is secular education, science. Now I will not go into detail again. what is the purpose of this education? The first type, the purpose is to get enlightenment. But the second type, the British system, is not for enlightenment, not even for producing Nobel laureates, because they took pride that they are teaching science to us, but it was only to create clerks who will work as administrators to handle Indians, to run the governance. However, when we got independence, 1947, most people say we got it by default. And suddenly we were asking the question, what education should we have for our Indians? And the only man who could answer was Jawaharlal Nehru. And he gave best answer that we need to create middle class, good engineers, good doctors, good teachers, good students, and everything good, who understand and improve the knowledge base of the country and who will contribute to development of the nation. Very simple definition of education. He was not talking about nirvana or moksha or anything. He wanted to create middle class, responsible, good Indian citizens. Then in 1990s, most of you might not have been born. We get something called globalization in trade and commerce, and that affected our science education. People realized that nobody is going to give you technology free. Therefore, every nation has to develop technology. Therefore, when you teach science, you'll have to teach the technology of doing science also along with that. And that we made a mistake earlier, because science and technology got divided during the British rule, where how to do things was called professional education. And this was separated as MBBS, BE, BTech and other things, whereas simple pure science was taught in universities. Therefore, people learned science, but not how to do science. I will have more to say on this later. So later we realized that everything is correct, everybody is correct. We now need complete literacy. We need elite engineers and doctors. We need capacity building. Every branch of knowledge we need, including poets and philosophers, artists, creative talent, everything, including training soldiers for defending our freedom, our boundaries, institution building, safeguarding political systems like democracy. These are all very important. All this has to come in education. Now, science education, will it contribute to this? That is what we will do. Science education in our country does not prepare students for research or career planning. This is a very strong statement I have made. If you observe 70 years of university system of education, college system, all we notice is the entire teaching is essentially giving information to students, and they have to by heart and answer the question paper. So the purpose of science education was to see that you pass the exam. And if you take this definition, government also analyzes the success of universities and colleges only by what is called as gross enrollment ratio, which means how many school students have joined the university system. That is how they analyze. And subsequently, how many people got second class. And that is how the analysis takes place. And so essentially we say science education was preparing the student to pass the exam. If you take this definition, then coaching centers are more successful than any university or college. Your Akash or Brilliant or any such thing, most of you are aware of all this, because many of them promise 100% success in entrance exams. And that is where we misunderstood what is teaching. Our students are not prepared during this science teaching for doing research or to build a career. Both we don't train them. That is how our research is of such a poor quality. That's how our students are so frustrated at the end. Even after getting PhD, he doesn't know what to do. All right. This system does not prepare you to become an independent thinker. It only prepares them to pass exam. All right. And this is not my statement. The most famous chemist and scientist in this country, Bharat Ratna C.N.R. Rao, has made a very damaging statement that India does not have an education system. We have only examination system. That is what all the colleges and universities are doing. And now, if we now translate all this and apply to our problem, which is biology education, and we will not have, because of time, I don't discuss school education. We did something. We wrote new textbooks for 11th and 12th class and called it biology. And if you, some of you might have seen these textbooks, they are written in a completely new and original way. We tried our best to integrate different sub areas, sub-disciplines of biology, and talked about processes, structure and functioning of living organisms, and nothing else. And that is the first attempt to integrate biology. Because when we say we have to teach all the three phases of biology, all the sub-departments or sub-disciplines of biology, it is not possible. So the only way to do that is to integrate and conceptualize. That is the key to do that. And therefore, as far as biology education goes, we did that for school level. In fact, I may also inform you that the two books that we wrote have been rated in the top 5 in the whole world of similar books, which were about 750 books. And this is done by not me, but people who are, online sellers. They have done that. And I'm very proud of all this kind of a thing. That means we can also write good books, and it has influenced many people. So the idea is that we have to repurpose our undergraduate degree. I will not talk more about school education. That's not the topic. We will not talk much about postgraduate education. We'll talk about UG, undergraduate education, because that is the bridge. And this first degree, therefore, the ultimate purpose of UG is to understand a particular domain knowledge. For us, therefore, biology should be the knowledge domain that we should try to understand during 3 years or 4 years or whatever is the system demanding. And therefore, we have to repurpose our undergraduate degree education program or science education, biology, should train them to become independent thinkers, for doing research, empower them, and also to develop, plan careers. And therefore, the only answer to all this is that we have to teach integrated biology. Now, in the last 3 minutes, I have used this word career, but most people don't understand what is this career. So let us spend 2 minutes on this educational degrees. It should empower us to build our career. And what is a career? Career is a way of earning, a living in a formal and organized system of hierarchical salaried positions or jobs. Please remember, middle class people who have invaded the entire science education scenario essentially want jobs at the end of the degree. They are not interested in work. This is the definition of middle class. How to become an employee and rise in the professional social ladder is referred to as shaping a career. Talent is, of course, necessary to succeed. If you take this, and we have used a new word, talent, let us understand this. We know today what is talent, but that was not the meaning 2000 years back. There is if you read Bible, Jesus Christ asked one of his disciples, how many talents did you bring today? Talent meant coin, money. Talent has nothing to do with cerebral properties. But today, we understand talent means intelligence, memory, scholarship, creativity, all cerebral properties which make you a successful academician, research or otherwise. That is called talent. And therefore, the meaning of this word talent has changed in the last, from let us say the days of Jesus Christ to the current days. Later in history, this has a different meaning, and success and recognition appears to be measured only by these criteria. All right. Now, something else happened during this definition of science and science doing research, getting education and getting successful. And this is in the form of awards and recognitions, which all working scientists, working teachers, they are aware of this. And therefore, certain unethical practices came into the practice of science, both as a teacher and as a scientist. And these led to a lot of controversies, because 80% or 90% of scientists were working for the award, for the recognition, and not for what interests them, which means people work for convenience, not for conviction. Such people, there is a piece of advice from Aristotle. I have used this name earlier also. We can say biology started with him around 350 BC. He is a teacher to Alexander the Great. He was appointed by Alexander's father, Prince Philip. He had a small grant of 800 talents. With that, he appointed 6,000 research scholars, asked them to go around and describe whatever they say, and then they published under his name. So obviously, he wouldn't have paid fellowship to any one of his research scholars. He didn't have that much funds. Whatever it is, he told this very great statement: dignity lies in deserving an honor and not in possessing it. This is a great statement which all of us should always remember. Don't work for award or recognition, work to solve a problem. That is the aim of science. I'll spend 2 minutes on this creativity, and then we will come to the solution that I am suggesting. What is creativity? Many people use this word very loosely. We can identify creative people. They come from arts, performing arts and technology areas, engineering and other things, but very rarely from pure science. Intelligence quotient has nothing to do with creativity. Creativity means divergent thinking. It is also known as innovation, whereas to solve problems in science, we need intelligence. Intelligence is convergent thinking. That is why intelligent quotient has nothing to do with creativity. Creative geniuses, they have think of alternative ideas and select the best. So creativity works like Darwinian evolution. Geniuses have more spatial and visual abilities than verbal. Most of the painters, most of the dancers, most of the technologies, they get creative solutions, but they can't tell you how they got. If you had asked Ramanujan, how did you get solution to this equation? He can't explain, but he will jump to the solution and give it. That's how Ramanujan has become a genius. Nobody else can understand this. Now, that is creativity. And to prove this point, I will tell you, we'll just take 10 names from history. Each one of them is called a creative genius. There is no controversy. If you go through the list, you will see Buddha, the man who gave us Buddhism. Picasso is a great painter who gave a school of painting called Cubism. Aurobindo, some of you might have heard of, integral yoga. It's a great seeker and seer. He was settled in Pondicherry and he passed away. Mozart is a music prodigy, is a genius. Thomas Alva Edison, you know, he invented many things. He had 800 patents. Leave the next two names. Noam Chomsky, this is a spelling mistake, and Isaac Newton and Michelangelo is a great painter who painted the roof of Vatican Church. Isaac Newton, you all know. So only Satyendranath Bose and the so-called Albert Einstein, these are the only two people from pure sciences, basic science, who are included in the list of creative genius. And that makes us conclude that creativity and creative geniuses are only found in technology area, engineering area, sculpture, architecture, and others. Performing arts like music, dance, and other things, painting, but very rarely in science. Only pure science of the highest quality, as represented by what Einstein did, what Satyendranath Bose did. The fundamental elementary particle is now called boson, the great man. He comes from Calcutta. He worked in Dhaka University and other places. We'll not go into detail. The whole point is, therefore, in general, creativity and creative geniuses can be found in other areas, but not in pure science. Humanities and technology fields have creative geniuses. We notice that this is what is I have already told. Intelligence is required for doing pure science, and this is so-called convergent thinking. Imagination, innovation, creativity is divergent thinking. That is what you see in a creative musician or an artist or a dancer or a technologist or an architect or any other thing. All right. So this is what is told again here, same thing. And therefore that comes now, what biology should we teach in this 3 years or 4 years of undergraduate thing when we have to teach so much information? And what are the aims of education which will affect teaching of biology during undergraduate days? In the light of aims of education and also to enable career building, we have already said we have to repurpose science education. We should teach mathematics, science and technology in higher secondary school stage, along with some courses in language and literature and social sciences. This is at the school. At the undergraduate level, integrated conceptualized biology. This is very important. Earlier, biology was information. That's how we divided into 10 departments. But if you conceptualize and ask only a set of 10 questions or even 3 questions, we can get the whole biology along with that. All right. But we should have supportive courses, because today mathematics is the language of every so-called natural science. You need physics and chemistry because they gave us tools and techniques. We can create methods in biology only using physical and chemical techniques and tools. Language and literature should also be taught to humanize science. Otherwise, we will get robots out of science students. And you should also teach history of science to understand how great scientists worked out their science and how did they research, how did they think of problems. These things you will know only if you read history of science, any area, especially biology. You will see what is the difference between discoveries and inventions and other things. So these things should be taught at the undergraduate level for repurposing this student to become an independent thinker, to become a research successful, and to build plan career. How can we do all this in a short period of 3 years? I told you the only thing is you have to conceptualize. Otherwise, you cannot achieve this kind of teaching load. At the postgraduate level, as you are doing, you can do anything you want. And the so-called New Education Policy 2020 has abolished MPhil degree. So now you have only scope for MSc and PhD. How to do this, how to structure this is a big topic. But one point one should remember, you can do it in any subject, in any fraction of the subject. It will not do injustice because postgraduate degree is dovetailed to doing research. So I will not speak more on that. But at the undergraduate level, as far as biology is concerned, we should not talk 10 parts of biology as separate. We should talk only one biology, and that is the conceptualized biology. And therefore, I made this statement that we should coach students at the school level, we should teach students at the UG level, and we should critically discuss in the classroom at the PG level. This is the mantra for successful science education. How can we do all that unless we bring structural changes in our educational system? And the suggestion that I have given, which I have discussed in many places, recently we have recommended this to Karnataka government. They are going to revamp the entire science education in all their universities, state universities and colleges. First thing is, it should be 11 plus 4 plus 3. I will have no time to discuss why I have said 11. This is essentially the old SSLC equivalent. Most important reason is students of this generation are much more mature, emotionally more stable, intelligent, and the kind of information base they have, they are much better than what we were at that time. And therefore, 11 years of schooling is good enough. It should be followed by what is called as 4-year undergraduate degree course. We started this in Delhi University way back in 2012, but it was abolished later for political reasons. Now the new education policy has recommended that universities should introduce 4-year degree course. Therefore, and then followed by post-graduation, which is you have freedom to do 1 year, 2 year, 3 year, whatever it is, or no year, you can directly go to PhD. 11 years of school plus 4 years of UG in integrated biology and 1, 2, 3 years of PG is what is recommended here. And This 4-year degree we can discuss for a lot of time. For want of time, I will not do that. The only thing advantage here is that it allows diversification in the 4th year or 7th and 8th semester, so that those who wish to become school teachers can get integrated with education technology. Those who want to do advanced research, they should get more training in research methodology and do project work in that semester. Similarly, those who want to become a journalist, they should have courses in mass communication, media, and then become successful, good, responsible science journalism. Some of you read newspapers, many of them carry articles on science. Half of them are actually nonsense, because these are not scientists who are writing. Some of them are very good, but most of them are useless. That is the reason why we are recommending that in the undergraduate degree, for those who wish to have, who are good in English communications, they should go into journalism and become good, responsible science journalists. Therefore, diversification is possible in a 4-year degree course and not in a 3-year degree course. Now, MPhil is going to be stopped, as most of you are aware. So you should have integrated PhD as an alternative. But one thing about science education, which most of us forget, the entire science which has become enterprise today is driven by a curiosity in the individual. If you look at 19th century British science, it was done by Gentiles who were very rich people, who were not worried about funding and who did not have this kind of systems like colleges, timetable, this kind of a thing. So they were doing research leisurely, but they did outstanding original research because there was time to pursue that. And therefore, it was basically a science which is driven by curiosity. Today, we are not doing it because one of the damaging things that has undertaken in the school and UG and PG education system, that's what Einstein has said it. It is a miracle that curiosity survives formal education. We admit horses and convert them into donkeys. That is what we are doing in the university system. And that is what Einstein is lamenting about. We have to maintain curiosity if you wish to become a successful scientist. There are many more issues about the science education, especially biology. All that I could do tell you, tracing the historical growth of biology and finding a necessity to teach all parts of biology, and that is possible in limited time only if you conceptualize. We have introduced certain models of such a undergraduate biology course in many places, in Delhi University, in Ahmedabad, in a university, Indrashil University in Gujarat, and now it is going to be in Karnataka universities. I hope the whole nation will follow this. Thank you very much. Thank you for patience. And